morning, viewers. It's Jen here at Check Her Joy, and this time I'm reviewing The Looking Glass Wars by Frank Beddor. I listened to the audiobook for this, which is narrated by Gerard Doyle. So this is a fantasy adventure book that is based off Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. Also, it's reimagined and it does its own thing, and it's much more of an epic fantasy book, novel, world than, Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. Within The Looking Glass Wars, there is the character of Alyss Heart. She is one of our main characters that we follow and our heroine. She is the Princess of Wonderland, and she is of the Heart clan, and Alice's name is actually spelled Alyss in here. And she ends up having to escape Wonderland because her evil Aunt Red has assassinated her parents, and Alice is like 7 or 11 or something. Like, she's really young and can't rule Wonderland, so she runs and she goes through the Pool of Tears, and it takes her to Earth. And she and her bodyguard are supposed to stay together, except they get separated as they travel through this portal thing, and Alice ends up having her own journey within Earth and London and gets adopted by the Little family and becomes Alice Little. And eventually she meets this author, Lewis Carrol, who writes Alice's Adventures in Wonderland based off the stories that she tells him of her childhood. Except he, twists it around and stuff. He wants to make an interesting story. He wants something much more fantastical, something much more of a children's book. And so the world in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is similar, but not exactly the same world that we see in The Looking Glass Wars. We do have the evil Queen of Hearts. That is Alice's Aunt Red, and she takes over, and she's awful, and she's constantly saying off with their heads. It feels like a very dystopian novel when Red takes over. Like, she completely flips all of Wonderland over. There are these two different versions of imagination happening. So there's white imagination, which is good creative force that you can just imagine things into being, and Alice's family, Alice and her parents, are champions of white imagination, and when her parents ruled Wonderland, white imagination was the thing, but now that the evil Queen Red is in charge, it's all about dark or black imagination, which is very destructive, and so Wonderland is falling apart. It's turned into this greedy, dark, seedy mess. So there's a few different things happening in this book. There is the time before the assassination, and we get to this brief look at what Wonderland was before. We get to see Alice as a 7-year-old girl and her birthday party and this parade of all these inventors, and we get to see the best of Wonderland. And we get to find out about the royal bodyguards and the millinery and Alice's best friend in the whole world, Dodge, who is the son of her parents' head of security, I think. And then we've got the boy that she's supposed to be marrying when she gets older. We've got this guy, Jack, who's kind of the snotty, aristocratic kid, and Alice and he don't get along well. In fact, Alice and Dodge are always messing with him, and he's trying to mess with them back. So we get this brief glimpse of Alice's childhood, and it sounds wonderful. And then Red comes and takes over Wonderland. She takes over the throne. She kills Alice's parents. It's a mess. She has these soldiers. I think she has the card soldiers. I'm trying to remember who had what. But we get to find out about the different weapons in Wonderland and the different soldiers. Pictures from the book. So we have like the card soldiers, which fold out and become walking like robots that can fight. And we have things like cannonball bombs or something that send out like electrical rays or something. I don't really remember. But then we've also got the millinery, which are the royal bodyguards, and especially Hatter Madigan, the main bodyguard. He has really awesome fighting skills and like a backpack full of knives and stuff and a hat that he can throw, and it becomes like a boomerang that just shoots out blades, and it's really cool. So there's lots of interesting creations and things because it's Wonderland, and if you just think about it, it can become reality. At least if you're really skilled at controlling imagination, you can create these really awesome things. Apparently, some people are better at controlling imagination and creating things than others. And Alice has this really really strong imagination and can create all kinds of things and just is really powerful and can create lots of things at once. Um, so it's cool to see just all this basically magic happening. However, the magic is kind of ill defined and it kind of feels like a catch all to it doesn't work whenever it's best convenient to the plot rather than necessarily having strong rules outlining what does and doesn't work. So sometimes the imagination just felt kind of like a contrived plot device. Also, we don't spend a ton of time in Wonderland in this book, and we're told it's similar but not completely the same as Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. So the world building could have used more. Like, we could have used stronger world building in here. Basically, this book relies very heavily on having a very flashy plot and really interesting fight scenes and stuff, but also I was listening to the audiobook and it was super easy to just zone out of the fight scenes and not pay any attention to them and then just start paying attention when the fight scene ended and like missed nothing by not following the fight scenes. They weren't one of those ones where like integral plot devices were happening during them. They aren't really my thing. I'm not a big fighting for the sake of fighting person. So there's a lot of fight scenes, and so I spent a lot of time just like zoning out of this book, honestly. I didn't really like Wonderland being so dark. Like, I know Red's in charge, and so this is the bad version of Wonderland, but also I like childhood light Lewis Carroll's version of Wonderland where everything sounds peachy. I want that. That's what I want. I like the Ghost in the Hatbox book where we have Matter as a child and the, decent rulers are in charge of Wonderland. So the actual storytelling of this book jumps around a lot also. We follow Alyss while she's by herself. We follow Hatter. We follow the Red Queen and her group. We follow the rebellion of Alyssians. These are the rebel force who believes in Alyss and the previous queen and is against Red and are actively trying to subvert Red's designs and just really being the revolution. So there's just so much going on. There's so many different groups that we're following and different characters that we're following, and the storyline is jumping around, and the timeline jumps also so much. So we go from Alyss being 7 to Alyss being like 17, and kind of just gotta go with the fact that there was this giant jump in time and that characters have progressed and that we don't get to see everything that happened and that we're catching up with them later. Kind of have to be able to go with the flow to follow this book. Time passing is undefined and a bit weird at times. Like, I don't really know how long Alyss spends with each thing while she's on Earth or where the timeline is of different things happening in Wonderland. Like, I don't know. I don't know if Wonderland and Earth are having the same time progression also. It's a really awesome idea and it's entertaining, but don't think too much about it, I guess. And also there's just kind of too much going on. There's too many different groups, too many different people. We're also following too many different sections. So we've got the before the assassinations Wonderland. Then we've got this Alyss is separate and on Earth, and the Red Queen's in charge of Wonderland, which feels different. And then we've got the section where Alyss eventually does return to Wonderland and has to fight the Red Queen. And each of these sections feels very tonally different and feels like it should have maybe been a different book. This book definitely plays with the idea of good versus evil and light versus dark imagination, and there's plenty of politics around that. And also we have Alyss's personal struggle for identity. When she goes through the pool of tears and ends up on Earth, and she ends up with the little family, they don't believe her. They don't believe that she's a princess. They don't believe in Wonderland. And so Alyss begins to not believe in Wonderland herself and starts to create her own life on Earth. And so when Hatter Madigan, the bodyguard, does find her again, then she has this identity crisis. And we see the identity crisis as a small child when nobody believes her, and also another identity crisis when she's an adult and finds out that everything she believed as a child actually is true, and it wasn't just her making things up. Basically, I went into this book having already read the prequels. I read the 5 graphic novels, and the children's book Ghost in the Hatbox first. And so I was expecting better writing because those are better thought out and better developed. And so when I got to this book, which is the first one that was written, I was kind of disappointed in the actual writing skill and how the world is actually brought to life, and I was hoping for better than it actually is. I am on book 2 seeing Red right now, and that one is a bit better. I don't know if it's just because we have the world building set up in book 1, or if Frank Beddor's writing just got substantially better on his second book. I don't really know right now, but book 2 is better, and I am appreciating that. I will say, though, that the Red Queen's main assassin, the cat, is creepy as heck. And I was actually working at the library when somebody returned Alyss the Looking Glass, like the Johnny Depp movie. And it has the cute little kitten on the back of the DVD, and that creeped me out. Like, this is the most adorable cat in the universe. And I am so traumatized by reading this book and the version of the cat in here that it just was like, ugh. Had a very visceral dislike of that, even though I love the Cheshire cat in the movie. Weird, right? I also had a problem with the fact that I have read and watched so many other versions of Wonderland, from, say, Heartless by Marissa Meyer or the sci-fi miniseries Alyss, and just seeing different versions of Wonderland that I couldn't help but compare this to those, and felt like this is not my favorite version of Wonderland either that's laid out in here. Even though I liked the graphic novels and the children's book, and it's the same world, theoretically. So, I was disappointed, but I still gave this book 3 stars. I originally gave it a higher rating, but when I actually sat down to do notes to review it, I ended up being like, actually, there's a lot wrong with this book, so I ended up giving it the 3 stars instead. So, let me know in the comments below if you've read The Looking Glass Wars and what you thought of it. I have also already reviewed the graphic novels and the children's book Hatter Madigan, Ghost in the Hatbox, and I'll post the links to those reviews in the description below. Peace out, I love you guys, and keep reading. Bye!